Number 1. I was 19, staying late at the college darkroom to develop some film for my photography class. The photography building, once a tobacco warehouse, was a dark, rickety hulk near some lonely railroad tracks in a little travelled part of campus. I finished developing my film close to midnight and headed out, nervous as always to be alone at night in this deserted part of town. It was dark. Several of the streetlights around the parking lot were out, and the few that remained were phoning it in, putting out a weak flickery light that did nothing to reassure me as I headed towards my car. I heard him before I saw him. A scrape of feet on asphalt. He said, "Hey, can you do me a favour?" I startled and dropped my keys, and he mumbled an apology for scaring me. I noticed he was wearing a jogging suit and was walking with a limp. "What do you need?" I asked. He hobbled a step or two towards me. "I think I sprained my ankle. Could you take me to the emergency room?" The university hospital was a short distance down the road. I hesitated. The guy looked perfectly pleasant, and he did seem to be in pain. But I had recently finished a book about a serial killer called Ted Bundy, who lured some of his victims by pretending to have a broken arm and asking for their help carrying books to his car. When they leaned over to put his stuff in the passenger seat of his VW Bug, he knocked them unconscious with a crowbar and stuffed them inside. This scene played across my mind as I looked at the guy. It also occurred to me to wonder why the hell anyone would want to jog in this creepy part of town. So I said, "I'm sorry, I can't do that, but I could call someone for you. There's a phone in the photography building there." "There's nobody to call. I just moved here. I don't really know anybody. Can't you just drive me? It's right down Limestone Avenue." He leaned against the car and winced as he reached down to rub his ankle. I offered to call an ambulance for him. "No, I can't afford that. I don't have health insurance. Can't you just drive me? I'll pay you $20. There was something in the way he said this last bit. Something wrong. Like that exercise in my acting class, where we had to recite "Mary Had a Little Lamb," as though we were delivering a tragic monologue or a furious rant. There was a tone rising up that didn't quite match the words he was saying. A raw urgency that reached down inside me and hit the panic button hard. There was a moment of silence between us. "I can't help you," I said. "I'm leaving." I gripped my keys, slipped them between my fingers the way my mum had taught me, so I could use them as a weapon if he came at me. I kept my eyes on him as I speed walked the last few feet to my car. He watched me drive away, still leaning against the car, a flat expression on his face. Away from the dark parking lot, driving through campus with my music turned on, the fear faded. I started to feel a little guilty for leaving the guy there, although I knew I'd done the thing that my mum and dad would have wanted me to do. I was about to turn into my dorm parking lot when I realised I needed to pick up some stuff for my breakfast the next morning, so I turned around and headed back in the direction I'd come. About a minute down the road, my stomach clenched. There was the guy in the jogging suit, running along the sidewalk. His ankle was perfectly fine. Later that summer, 2 students at my college were attacked by those same railroad tracks. The girl survived, but her boyfriend died. The man who attacked them was a serial killer, dubbed the Railroad Killer by the police. He murdered dozens of people across several states, most of them near railroad tracks. I didn't see his mugshot on TV until years later, but the picture broke me out in the same icy sweat I felt when I saw that guy running down the street. I can't be 100% positive, but my gut tells me I escaped a serial killer that night. Number 2. When I was around 7 years old, my parents would always take me to a local grocery store and always ignore my complaints on how boring the trip was. Since there was nothing that caught my eye during these trips, I would always sit in those grocery carts and play with toys that I brought from home, while my parents went to different aisles to gather all the groceries they needed. Obviously, it was not a smart idea to leave your 7-year-old alone in a grocery cart in the first place, but I was a very obedient child, and that part of town had a peaceful and friendly atmosphere to it. Having my parents out of sight made me anxious at first, but I slowly grew accustomed to it once I realized that they would always come back after a few minutes. I just had to wait patiently. One day, my parents left me on the cart and didn't come back for quite a while. Now, this would usually be the time when I would call for my parents to come back, but they bought me a Game Boy Advance a few days back, so I was too engrossed in whatever I was playing to even realize how many minutes had passed. While I was waiting for my parents, a woman who I've never seen before in my life seemed to notice that I was alone, and decided to approach the cart. She lightly tapped my shoulder to get my attention away from my game, which jolted me out of my trance. When I looked up at the woman, her face immediately formed into a huge grin, but I could tell it wasn't genuine. She began to ask me random questions, and tried to keep a conversation, but I refused to speak. I was a very shy child and always hated talking to adults who weren't my parents. "What's your name, sweetie?" Silence. "Aren't you bored sitting in that cart alone?" More silence. "Where are your parents?" Again, silence. I never felt like I was in danger while the lady talked my ear off, because there had been many instances in the past where friends of my parents who live around the area would spot me in the cart. They'd wait with me and also try to make small talk with me until one of my parents would come back, which would inevitably lead to another very long and boring hour or so in the middle of the grocery store. The woman eventually gave up making small talk and began to push the cart and said, "Why don't we look for your parents together?" Again, I didn't say anything, since I assumed she was just one of the millions of friends my father and mother had. We were near the market doors when I noticed my father inside an aisle, carrying a bunch of items. I called out to him and said something along the lines of, "Dad, your friend wants to see you." When my dad looked up to where I was, his face paled when he saw the situation I was in, and just dropped everything he had in his arms and tried to rush over to the cart, shouting my name. The woman, at this point, began freaking out, and began to push the cart even faster. We were just outside of the store, and about halfway into the parking lot, when she realized she couldn't outrun my dad if she kept pushing the cart. In a complete panic, she let go of the cart and jumped into a car with a male driver, before speeding off. It was obvious that she didn't give a shit for my safety. Now, here I was, a 7-year-old in a shopping cart, screaming bloody murder as it rolled onto the street. I'm guessing there was a dent or something on the road, because the cart then fell over onto its side, which gave me massive scrapes and bruises to the left side of my body. Seconds later, I hear my dad swearing and quickly picking me up off the road, cradling me in his arms as I continued wailing. Cops were called, and my dad gave them a statement. Unfortunately, he couldn't get the license plate of the car, because when he saw me fall on the street, he ran over to me with full force, not even realizing the woman escaped with her companion. I had to get a few stitches and had a limp for a few days, but other than that, I was okay. Needless to say, my parents never took me to their boring grocery trips ever again. Number 3. This is only brief, but it scared me for a long, long time. I used to live in a very isolated, rural town with a population of approximately 120 people, and, as expected, I knew everyone there. My best friend and I were your typical benign teenage delinquents, and our favourite game at the time was an activity we referred to as Dead Fred. We would stuff a full-length wetsuit with newspaper, dress it in long sleeves and jeans, and leave it lying in the middle of our street at night time. Meanwhile, we would hide in a bush and laugh and muse over the varied reactions of those who came across the scene. One night, a car seemingly didn't even notice dead Fred, and drove right over him at high speed. The driver screeched to a stop about 50 meters away, and got out of the car. I recognized him. It was a close friend's dad, a recently retired accountant who I knew well, and had been my rugby coach for the last few seasons. He looked unstable, possibly shaken, but likely drunk. Drink driving was quite common in such a small country town. Without much hesitation, he pulled a rifle from the boot of his car, fired several shots at the corpse from afar, and drove away. My friend and I kept this to ourselves, and as far as I know, we're the only two who know. The driver remained a close family friend, continued to coach me in rugby, and has since had grandchildren. I still see him when I go home for holidays. As far as I know, he never fessed up to the incident, and carried on for the next 23 years, as if nothing had happened. Yes, it was a dangerous game, and I was a dumb teenager. However, Fred was in plain sight. This guy wasn't paying attention to where he was going, and he chose to fucking shoot the thing without even checking on it. I'm not defending myself or denigrating him. I'm just telling you what happened. A man I know well basically appears to have had no problem killing someone and pretending nothing ever happened. Number 4. This is a memory I've tried to block out, but the other day, when my siblings and I were talking about funny stuff my dad did when he was alive, and how humorously absent-minded he was as a parent, this long-forgotten memory came back to me, and I can't stop thinking about it. When I was about 4 years old, I had a playground fall that resulted in a serious cut on the back of my head that required stitches. A few weeks later, my dad took me back to the doctors to have them removed. I was very brave and sat very still for the doctor, unlike the huge fuss I'd made when they put them in. So, as a reward, my dad got me an ice cream and took me to the beach for a paddle. It was a very small Australian town, and the beach was quite secluded. Even though it was the middle of summer, there were only a handful of slightly older children swimming. Mind you, without their parents. My dad walked me down to the water's edge, and warned me sternly to stay in the shallow water, and not to go any deeper than my knees. Then he disappeared, I imagine to use a public restroom or something. I know that sounds bad, but he wasn't a bad father. As I mentioned before, he could just be a bit irresponsible and absent-minded at times, but he meant well. It drove my mum insane. There was an older boy there, about 10 years old, possibly older. He was paddling around a few meters away, but slowly came closer, leaving the other children. Then he called out to me. I remember he had blonde hair and was smiling brightly. He asked me about my name and my age. I answered, also filling him in on the little important details about my trip to the doctors that morning. I emphasized that I had been very brave to try and impress him. My story seemed to amuse him, and he asked me why I didn't come out and swim a little deeper. I explained to him that I wasn't allowed to go past my knees until my dad came back, because I couldn't swim very well yet, and I'd get into trouble. He assured me that I couldn't possibly get into trouble if he was teaching me how to swim, and besides, my dad wouldn't see because he wasn't there. When I was still hesitant, he added, "Are you scared? I thought you were brave." So, I followed him out until my feet couldn't touch the bottom, and he immediately held me under. I'm getting angry and upset just thinking about this. I struggled, but he was more than twice my age and size. I realise now, he had taken me out willingly, so the other kids wouldn't know what he was up to. Drowning an unattended, young child really is the perfect crime, because you could very easily pass that off as an accident. Probably only moments before I lost consciousness, the boy abruptly let me go, and my dad lifted me out of the water. I can still see the look of bewilderment, mixed with fear and rage, on my dad's face. Then for what seemed like a very long time, he patted my back while I screamed, sobbed, and coughed all over his shoulder. By the time that I had settled and my father was satisfied that I was okay, the boy and the other kids were long gone, although my dad still went driving around looking for them. Had that kid stuck around, I'm certain my father would have killed him. To answer a few questions, as far as I know, my dad never found out about who the boy was, and shortly after this, we moved towns. I don't know if he ever went to the police or not. I can't be certain. All I know is that he never told my mum about the incident, probably because she would have lost her shit at knowing that he left me alone. Also, for those of you who asked, I really do feel like that kid seriously meant to kill me. There was something malicious about the way he tightened his hold when I struggled. It felt like he was determined, and not mucking about. So determined, in fact, he didn't even see my father coming. Number 5. This is my great-grandmother's story. She passed away in 2005, at the ripe old age of 103. This story is family folklore. But, unlike most family folklores, which have been exaggerated with time, this one is 100% true. This story takes place in the year 1912, in a little Iowa farming community named Villisca. One summer day, my great-grandmother was asked if she would like to stay overnight at her friend's house with 2 other girls. When my great-grandmother asked her parents if she could attend the sleepover, she was told that she couldn't, as there was too much housework that needed to be done, but that she could go over the next day after her morning chores had been completed. The next morning, my great-grandmother's friend, her siblings, her parents, and the 2 other guests who were staying overnight were found murdered. The police discovered that all 8 people had been bludgeoned to death. The murder weapon, an axe, was left in the house. The murder has never been solved. To this day, my family's unofficial motto is "Saved by chores." And yes, this story is used in my family to scare children into completing their housework. Note: in the description below, you can find a link to a webpage which details the murders. Hi guys, Lazy Masquerade here. Hope you enjoyed the video. My laptop's finally been fixed, so my special thank you Q&A will be coming very shortly. Make sure to check out Anthony's artwork as well via the links in the description. Personally, I think he's outdone himself with this recent thumbnail. It's very unsettling, the pig man. Make sure to follow me on Twitter to vote on what you'd like to see in the next episode on Tuesday. Join the Lazy Legion by subscribing. Keep sending me your own scary stories to be featured in future episodes, and you'll hear from me again very soon. Until the next video, guys, stay spooky. And remember, the best things happen in the dark.